You guys, I got an idea that I want to propose because I'm seeing a trend amongst white evangelical patriarchal men. I'm seeing a little bit of a trend. So I want to propose something real quick. What happens to any ancient group when a society or a nation is conquered, declining, or decaying? What happens to that religion? Now, I'm going to propose it could be multiple things that can happen, but just for the sake of this uh, theory, if you will, I'm going to say it's a few things that happen. That belief system or that religion's God is absorbed into another God. The conquerors, their God is absorbed. People start to go to other gods, so they replace their God for another God or another concept of religion, however you want to look at it. And lastly, they reject the form of God. Now, I'm doing this kind of experiment just because when looking at the scientific racist mystics, you know, when I look at them, a lot of them reject Christianity. They still have patriarchal, I don't know, feelings, a patriarchal approach, but they aren't Christian. Their whole thing is we're going to go back to the old gods, and Christianity is a weak, you know, Jewish origins, and everything. They go off on Christianity and the history because these people know what happened when Christianity came kind of into power in all of these nations. How missionaries, or different, evangelists and people came to these nations and they conquered those lands and got rid of a lot of their culture. A lot. If you look at some of some of these gods in these European nations, they have to reconstruct the origin of the god. I was looking at that before, like a few years ago, and they had a reconstruction of possible gods based on uh, a synthesis, I guess, of the gods they already had knowledge of, because all of the gods in the region kind of paralleled. They just kind of had different names, so they kind of have a reconstruction of different gods that are extinct now that we'll never know the truth about other than this reconstruction. You get what I'm saying? So, what does this have to do with, um, white patriarchs, former Christians? What does that have to do with them, switching God, rejecting gods? Well, typically, like I was just saying, in a declining nation where the economy's bad, where the men are weak, where things aren't going well, you start to get that type of rhetoric about the truth about Christianity. They finally admit it, and they start talking about Odin and Thor and the Nordics and the Vikings and the German gods and all of these gods, and how they shouldn't have converted to Christianity, and how it's Roman filth, and you know what I mean. So my whole point is when looking at kind of history, when even you look at history and you look at whenever a nation is kind of transitioning, the gods transition in multitude of ways, but I'm just giving this example because I see like you know the scientific racist kind of mystic, that end of it. I'm seeing those guys reject Christianity all the way, and they have this whole idea of it's kind of new age, because it's been so much progression and evolution since then. It's kind of a synthesis between whatever the adherer, whichever god the adherer kind of likes, because it doesn't have a Christian foundation. So I guess it's some, you could say it's polytheistic, and it's got kind of more of an ancestral worship, spiritual component attached to it, more of a nature, ancestral nature worshiping, more of a that type of attachment to it. But I noticed just it's typically the new faith, the new ideal is typically birthed out of weakness. It's not a birth out of strength. And to go even further, it makes total sense. A weak nation can't be Christians. You can only be Christians when the work is done. You know what I mean? You can't. You going through a rebuild, because I believe in kind of how like a cyclic, like our superpowers go through a cyclic process. I'm not even gonna get into it right now, but it goes into a cyclic process of from bottom peak decline. From start peak decline. Every superpower goes through that process, and it's a specific kind of, it's a particular process it goes through until it reaches its inevitable collapse. And right now, what are you seeing with a lot of scientific, whether they know it or not, scientific racist mystics? And when I say that, I mean for people who may be confused, like people who are into all of those ancient polytheistic gods from the Greeks, and like I said, the Nordic and the Vikings, and you got a lot of, it's more like a Scotland. You got different gods that they that they've worshipped. Well, it's a merger between that and kind of an element of white nationalism. You know what I mean? You kind of got the mystic, spiritual uh, alignment, right? And then you have its political, white nationalist, hyper nationalist kind of direction. It kind of creates like a Nazism concept. Like if you look at kind of what the Nazis and kind of what Hitler believed in. People like to say that Hitler was a Christian, but he wasn't a Christian. Like you look at, truly a lot of his belief system went back, like I said, to those ancient gods, and it was a merger of white nationalism or whatever. But back to my point, like you can't have a nation full of God fearing Christian men, and I'm talking about in reality, not in your Christian fantasy. In reality, of God fearing Christian men when you're on your way down. You get what I'm saying? Like building, you can see the rainbow, you can see what's to come. Yeah. yeah, you got all this hope and all of this faith and everything, but what we're entering now is a collapse. Whether you want to believe it or not, these corporations don't want to pay you, and they run your country. Has nothing to do with racist policies and anti-whiteness. It has nothing to do with none of that. They don't want to pay you. It's a monopoly. It's a monopoly. You're not going to become one of the 1%. You're not going to experience the American dream. It's dead. But back to my point, though, like about it being a decaying society. We're on our way down. So a lot of people in America are so, influenced by this Christian nationalist concept. They're so influenced by that they can't see past it. They can't go. Like I said, it's so pervasive. Like it's mind control. It's you get conditioned from birth with these ideas. So people thinking it's a moral decay and all of that. Yes, that's all a byproduct of your economy. Why do you think it's a moral decay? You think it's a moral decay because of black people? You think it's a moral decay because of people don't believe in Christ and people stop going to church? It's a moral that, like, any practical person, any critically thinking person that isn't influenced by religion is going to tell you it's the economy. It's the economy. There's a correlation between the economy, poverty, and moral decay. Look at the black community. Even though I know white supremacists don't even want to pay attention to that because they believe it's a genetic disposition. Come on. It's money. You get what I'm saying? So we're on our way down. This empire is down. It's on the downward slope. There's nothing you can do about it. Like I was mentioning briefly just about the cyclic process in terms of superpowers. If that theory holds up, it'll probably likely be China as the next superpower. Well, in that world, what happens? What happens to the men? The men are, you can't be a God-fearing Christian man and your world is collapsing around you. It's not going to work. You're going to have to adopt positions of power just because of the fundamental basis of Christianity. In Christianity, you're weak. We're not. You ain't shit. You're weak. We're wretched. We're born in sin. You can't build a strong. I'm talking about go from. We're on a decay. You can't begin the processes of the rebuild from that. That's something that you implement when it's time to actually build the nation. When you're on a decay and you're trying to think about building and you're trying to, come up with a new version, you're in between history. Let's just say you're in between history. When they write the story, they're not gonna of America. They don't talk about the deists and the Freemasons a whole lot. They say it was built off of Christian values, right? They don't tell you that it was a group full of deists, right? Like they believe in God, but they believe it's a do nothing God. He just basically creates the world and then lets it play out. They don't tell you that. That way they can just align with Christianity or whoever they want to align with that has wisdom. You know, because they believe in a deist God. Your forefathers. But yeah, it's a group of these guys, a large group that, they haven't forgot. They haven't forgot about their roots in polytheism and, Scandinavia and Germany and the Slavs and, they have not forgot the the gods, the all of those gods, and those are going to be the gods that, in a time of weakness, in a time of transition, they go back to. And I didn't mention. It's a lot that I didn't mention. See, you when you're in a state of decay, when you're in a state of deterioration, there's so many questions that are going in your mind during that state. Like, what am I doing wrong? Is this God even real? Talking about the Christian God, right? You're going through a collapse, and you mean to tell me that Jesus isn't going to help me? Am I not in favor? Is he not real? And then don't let a nation get invaded and their God get absorbed, or their God gets completely destroyed. In this case, I'm just saying it's going to be some type of a transition, in this case, back to, the old gods. And you see it's widely popular amongst scientific race proponents and mystics in that space. But that's all I got right now.